Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I like to use my master's in English to discuss the horror genre. And today's video is a July wrap up. So, after a quick intro, I'll talk about all of the books that I read in the month of July. I'm a bit late getting to my July wrap up. I'm recording this today is August 12th, and I have to admit that my mental health was pretty crappy in the month of July, and I really don't know how much I retained of what I read. So don't judge my wrap ups by this video because I will admit I'm not feeling too confident in my ability to recount the books I've read. So, the first book I want to talk about is my lowest rated book for the month. And that is I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I really wanted to love this book. I love the Indian Lake trilogy, which is like his take on Final Girls, bringing in, of course, some slasher elements there. But I Was a Teenage Slasher is from the point of view of Tali Driver, who becomes a teenage slasher. So the story is told through flashbacks and letters that he's writing to his best friend, kind of recounting the events that made him into this teenage slasher. And I really struggled to get through that one. So, again, like I said, 2.5 for me. The next book I want to talk about is Fragile Animals by Genevieve Jagger. I gave this book a 3.5. This book follows Noelle, who goes on a trip to the Isle of Butte to kind of try to get away from her everyday life. She's dealing with past trauma from her Catholic upbringing, past trauma dealing with her mother and the way that her mother was just not very affectionate. I don't know. Like I said, this is the worst wrap up ever. I don't remember much of anything about this book. Noelle meets this man at the hotel where she's staying. He may be a vampire. They have some weird kind of relationship thing going where they start confessing different things to each other. So as the relationship goes on, there may be some type of deeper involvement between the two of them. I'm trying not to say a lot. First of all, because I don't remember much, unfortunately, but also because I don't want to give spoilers away. But I feel like this book is kind of about coming to terms with things in your past and making a decision to move forward. One other thing, I do want to share a quote from this book, and this may be triggering for some who have experienced religious trauma. I don't really talk about that very much on my channel, not yet anyway, but I was traumatized by religion. And one of the quotes in this book that really just hit me hard is the following. The priest told me that should I ever see a Prince music video again, I was to picture Jesus's body hanging mutilated on the cross. I should think of him in the tomb in agony. I should picture him crying and know myself to be the source of his tears. Yeah, I had things like that said to me, things like that that I dealt with growing up. So that's also a content and trigger warning. Sometimes I find it to be cathartic when I read about characters who experience things similar to me, but I know that doesn't always work for everyone, and it would depend on too. For me, as well as I'm sure for others, what kind of headspace you're in at the time you're reading the book. But I felt very much a kinship with the narrator of the story during that point. Now, moving on to 4-star books. The first one I want to talk about is Below by Laurel Hightower. I'm not going to say anything about this because I did vlog it in my mood reading vlog, which I will link down below. And you'll be able to see from that vlog that I can coherently speak about the books that I read. Uh, A second 4-star book that I read for that vlog is The Turtle Boy by Keelan Patrick Burke. And again, you can hear my thoughts about that in that mood reading vlog. So let me move on now to other 4-star books. So, one other 4-star book I read is A Child Alone with Strangers by Philip Fracassi. I'll listen to that one on audio. It is a very long audiobook. It follows the story of a young boy whose father died in a very horrific way. And without giving anything away, he was right there and experienced trauma when his father died the way that he did. So he is adopted by his uncle and aunt. His uncle is his father's brother. And because there is a settlement where the young boy is given a great deal of money, of course, put, I guess, into a trust or something, that kind of brings out some criminal element who want to kidnap. The young boy's name is Henry, just for convenience sake. Henry is easier if I just call him by his name. This group of people kidnaps Henry, and they take him to this very isolated house out in the woods, and they may get more than they bargained for because there might be some kind of creature out in the woods. And I probably did a terrible job of talking about that book, but I did give it 4 stars. So moving on, the next 4-star book that I want to talk about, and I know I'm looking down, but it's because I want to make sure I don't forget anything that I did read. The next 4-star book is The Final Women by Pardeep Aujla. And I really enjoyed this book. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. So we're following the story of women who survived a killer, kind of a Friday the 13th style of killer, but maybe something supernatural going on. And I don't want to say a lot about this one because it is going to be a part of my upcoming series on Final Girls. So I'm kind of going to leave it there. Speaking of that, also another 4-star read for me is Final Girl Redux by Kimberly Pinson. And this is a relaxed exploration of women in the horror genre. And I did enjoy this book. She has some kind of updated and differing views from those of Carol J. Clover, who is famous, of course, for writing Men, Women, and Chainsaws. But I don't want to say a whole lot about this book. I do have a lot to say about it, but I just am saving it for the upcoming Final Girl series that I will be doing. So let me move on to my next 4-star read that I want to talk about. And that is Lost in the Garden by Adam S. Leslie. Yeah, I had to look and see who this was by. I read this at the beginning of July, and this is a weird one. This is definitely a weird one. So we follow this group of young people who are kind of going against the rule of never going to Almondby. So let me tell you a little bit about this book. Probably just going to read the synopsis on the back. Heather, Rachel, and Antonia are going to Almondby. Heather needs to find her boyfriend who, like so many, went and never came back. Rachel has a mysterious package to deliver and her life depends on it. And Antonia, poor love-struck Antonia, just wants the chance to spend the day with Heather. So off they set through the idyllic yet perilous English countryside in which nature thrives in abundance and summer lasts forever. Miserable. I hate summer. And as they travel through ever shifting geography and encounter strange voices in the fizz of shortwave radio, the harder it becomes to tell friend from foe. Creepy, dreamlike, unsettling, and unforgettable, you are about to join the privileged few who come to understand exactly why we don't go to Almondby. So I took a lot of notes in addition to like tabbing a lot of Lost in the Garden. So I'm just going to try to go through some of those notes and talk a little bit about my experience with this book. So, as I mentioned when I read the synopsis, in this book, Lost in the Garden, the summer is eternal. It'll be absolutely miserable. But this is a quote from the book that I felt like really encapsulated what I feel about summer here in South Alabama. It was still morning, but already the heat was a heavy thing with tendrils, a big bulbous kraken. I can't even read my own writing, y'all. Let me try this again. It was still morning, but already the heat was a heavy thing with tendrils, a big bulbous kraken. It writhed soggily, making everything worse and more difficult. Even breathing was starting to become a chore. Yes. I also liked in this book a reference to the Green Woman. They have kind of a local lore. They call her, and I'm probably butchering this, Eggisgrim, and she is said to steal unwary children from their beds at night. She's like this personification of the natural world and the unpredictable nature of mortality. Because, of course, when these stories are being told, this would be a time during which you did have a lot of children that died young because there weren't the advancements, made in medicine that we have now. So sometimes to try to deal with very real life loss, people would tell these folklore tales and kind of make up these fictional creatures to try to explain the horrors of everyday life. So I thought that was interesting. And then there were some sections that really made me think of the movie Midsommar, which is one of my favorites. So let me read some of those quotes to you. With every step, they became the landscape, and the landscape became them. So, if you've watched Midsommar, you may recall whenever sometimes Danny, the main character, puts her hand down in the grass, it starts to kind of grow through her hand. And I think there's a part where it grows like through her feet too. So, it's just this idea of becoming one with nature. There were some other sections too that reminded me of Midsommar. There are some references to some kind of sacrifice. One of the characters kind of takes on a role that reminded me of a May Queen. And I don't want to say a whole lot more because I don't want to give spoilers for this book. I'm trying to look and see what other things I might want to talk about. I think a lot of my other quotes would be spoiler, but this book I had to take a lot of time to get through, not only because it's chunky, but because it really reads very much like a fever dream and not necessarily plot, driven. I don't even know if you could call it character driven. Again, kind of one of those books where, and I hate to say this because it seems cliche, but like vibes. It's if you like Midsommar and even weirder, I think, vibes, then check out Lost in the Garden. Now let's get to 5-star books for the month of July. So the first one I want to talk about is The Har by David Sodergren. And to be honest, I'm not really going to talk about that one a lot here because I read it for my mood reading vlog. So you can hear my thoughts there. Another 5-star read I have for my mood reading vlog is Full Dark, No Stars by Stephen King. That collection includes A Good Marriage, 1922, Fair Extension, and Big Driver. And just like the title says, it is dark, and I gave it 5 stars. And I want to now talk about a classic that I read and gave 5 stars to, and that is The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. Notice that this book features an introduction by Chuck Palahniuk, and so I want to show off my Rosemary's Baby, which matches it, and also has an introduction by Chuck Palahniuk. But The Stepford Wives is a classic by Ira Levin, and we follow a couple who moves into this seemingly perfect town. Again, this kind of has themes of the underlying terrors of suburbia. And you see these wives, they all seem to have similar physical attributes. They all just smile and love to clean the house and love to take care of their husbands and children. And they just don't have any time for any outside interest. So, our main character, I believe her name is Joanna. Yes, Joanna. She begins to feel that something sinister is underlying all of this seemingly perfect, lives of her fellow, wives. And we do find out that something sinister is indeed going on. This, of course, is a commentary on the feminist movement taking place in the 70s. It's a commentary on the backlash that took place, where you have some men who don't want women to have freedom. They don't want women to pursue careers and to pursue their own interests. And this book stands the test of time and still remains very relevant today. So the last 5-star book that I had for July, technically I finished it like the first couple of days of August, but I do want to go ahead and mention it here. And that is The Once Yellow House by Gemma Amor. And if you don't know already, she's one of my favorite authors. I have given everything I've read by her either 4 or 5 stars. The Once Yellow House is a strange little story that follows Kate, who used to be a part of a cult. And she's going to interview Hope, who was married to the cult leader. Both of them escaped the destruction that took place on the last night that the cult was all together. But this book really dives into a lot of different themes. Not only the idea of cults and the abusiveness that takes place within, the cult kind of situation, but it also talks about spousal abuse and the kind of things that Hope dealt with her husband, Thomas, who was the cult leader. And I don't want to say a lot about this one right now because I am working on a video where I'll be talking about The Once Yellow House in comparison with the classic The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So I know I'm kind of giving you, you got to wait and hear some things, but that is just kind of where I am right now. I've got some projects in mind, some that I'm working on and that I want to share with you. So I'm going to conclude this very unhinged wrap up here. If you enjoyed this, you can hit that like button, you can subscribe, and you can hit that bell so you won't miss any of the exciting things coming up on my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. Hopping back on really quick, I didn't even get my mic out, but I forgot to mention one of the 5-star books that I read for the month of July, and that is Final Girls by Mira Grant. And again, I'm not going to say a lot about this one because I am going to be talking about it in my Final Girl series. But this is really a sci-fi take on the idea of final girls and dealing with past trauma, because you have a doctor, I guess she would be, or some kind of psychiatrist. And she's developed this program where through virtual reality, someone can come in and kind of experience like events that you would experience in a horror movie. And it kind of helps you deal with your past and start to confront real life issues that you've been struggling with. And I want to say more about that in my series, but I did want to hop back on really quick because I did forget to mention, 5 stars for Final Girls by Mira Grant. Bye again.